Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather at a pivotal moment, where political courage is being tested, and the lines between bold leadership and empty rhetoric are being drawn in real time. In a powerful and unapologetic exchange, Congressman Wesley Hunt raised a direct and stinging question to Representative Jasmine Crockett: "Where's your backbone?" It wasn't just a personal challenge, it was a broader call to action. A call to stand firm in truth, to rise above partisan theatrics, and to represent the people with integrity and grit. This moment wasn't just about two politicians, it was about the very nature of leadership, accountability, and the courage to speak when it matters most. Let's unpack what led to this confrontation, what it reveals about our current political climate, and why this challenge might echo far beyond the walls of Congress. Political courage requires standing firm, even when it's unpopular. This fundamental truth lies at the heart of genuine leadership. In the world of politics, popularity often becomes the metric by which decisions are made. But true courage is not defined by applause or approval, it's revealed when a leader chooses principle over praise. Throughout history, the most impactful leaders were those who stood against the tide, who refused to bend their values for political convenience, and who weathered criticism because they believed in something greater than themselves. They were not swayed by momentary backlash or the shifting winds of public opinion. Instead, they held the line, stood their ground, and embraced the consequences of doing what was right over what was easy. In today's increasingly polarized political climate, where narratives are shaped in real time by viral headlines and social media reactions, that kind of steadfastness is not only rare, it's essential. When a public servant takes a position that challenges the status quo or confronts powerful interests, they risk alienation. They may be ostracized by their peers, ridiculed in the media, or misunderstood by their constituents. But that is the cost of real courage. It's about making choices that serve justice, not just the next election cycle. It means holding a position because it's morally sound, not because it's politically safe. For many, the temptation to follow the path of least resistance is overwhelming. It's far easier to align oneself with popular opinion, to echo talking points that please the base, or to avoid controversy entirely. But a leader who does this too often becomes a follower in disguise, reactive instead of proactive, silent when they should speak. Political courage also involves taking responsibility for hard truths. Whether it's acknowledging the failures within one's own party, admitting past errors, or standing against a harmful bill even if it was proposed by allies, the courageous path is usually the loneliest one. When Congressman Wesley Hunt challenged Jasmine Crockett with the now viral question, "Where's your backbone?" he wasn't just questioning her personal conviction, he was symbolically addressing a wider issue: the growing lack of principled stands in political discourse. It's not enough to speak eloquently or attack the opposing side. What matters is whether a leader is willing to speak truth even when it means facing backlash from their own supporters. That's where backbone truly reveals itself, in moments of moral testing, in the silence between votes, and in the choices made behind closed doors. This principle of courage goes beyond party lines. It applies equally to conservatives, liberals, independents, and everyone in between. The question is not whether someone belongs to the right party or holds the right platform, it's whether they're willing to act on those beliefs when it costs them something. Are they willing to vote against a flawed policy even if their party supports it? Can they call out injustice even when it's inconvenient? Do they value integrity more than image? These are the questions that separate politicians from public servants, noisemakers from change makers. Standing firm, especially in the face of unpopularity, is what transforms a name into a legacy. Furthermore, political courage means protecting the rights of the few, even when the majority is indifferent or opposed. In a democratic system, leadership is not about giving people what they want at every moment, it's about guiding the public towards what is just and equitable, even when it's uncomfortable. This is particularly important in issues involving civil rights, criminal justice reform, economic inequality, or healthcare access. These are arenas where the courageous must stand, often alone, challenging systems that have long favored the powerful. The history of legislative change in America is full of moments where lone voices sparked national transformation. From desegregation to voting rights to marriage equality, it was always the brave few who stood in the fire first. Being unpopular in these moments doesn't mean being wrong. It often means being ahead. And those who stand firm eventually become the ones others follow. But they must first endure the pressure, the criticism, and the doubt that comes with leadership. This is why courage is not simply about bold statements during debates or passionate speeches on the floor of Congress. It's about what a leader does when the cameras are off, when donors are pressing for favors, and when advisors warn them that taking a stand could cost them support. In those quiet moments, political courage is tested most severely. Wesley Hunt's confrontation with Jasmine Crockett may have appeared as political theater to some, but beneath the surface, it tapped into something deeper, a demand for authenticity and leadership. When he asked, "Where's your backbone?" it was a challenge not just to her, but to every elected official who dodges hard questions, avoids tough decisions, or hides behind party loyalty. It was a reminder that backbone is not built in comfort, it is forged in the crucible of adversity. It's about choosing to speak when silence is safer, to dissent when agreement is expected, and to hold the line when everyone else is retreating. This kind of courage is contagious. When one leader dares to take a stand, it often inspires others to do the same. But someone must go first. Someone must be willing to endure the criticism, take the political hit, and face the discomfort of standing alone. That's the first step in shifting the culture of cowardice into a culture of conviction. Young voters, aspiring public servants, and politically engaged citizens are watching. They are not inspired by polished statements or strategic alliances. They are moved by truth, passion, and unwavering conviction. And they are yearning for leaders who don't just talk about values, but who live them, defend them, and risk for them. In this age of soundbites and scandal cycles, political courage can sometimes feel obsolete. But it is more necessary now than ever. The challenges our world faces, climate change, systemic inequality, healthcare crises, foreign conflicts, require leaders who will not waver in the face of resistance. They require leaders who prioritize the next generation over the next poll. That kind of leadership starts with courage, and courage starts with standing firm when it's unpopular. Leadership is tested through accountability, not soundbites. In an era where media clips dominate political discourse and viral moments often overshadow meaningful debate, the essence of true leadership is being lost in the noise. Soundbites might grab headlines, stir emotion, or rally a base, but they rarely offer the substance that governance demands. Leadership is not a performance, it's a responsibility. And that responsibility is measured not by how loudly one speaks, but by how consistently one answers for their actions. Accountability is the foundation upon which trust between a public servant and the people is built. It is the mirror that every leader must look into, not occasionally, but constantly, to ask themselves, have I upheld my duty? Have I delivered on my promises? Have I remained truthful, even when it's inconvenient? Soundbites often allow politicians to sidestep that mirror. They offer a shortcut, a crafted phrase here, a strategic jab there, to distract from deeper issues. With a few well-rehearsed lines, a leader can appear strong, decisive, even visionary. But that appearance is fleeting. Without accountability, those words become hollow. When constituents look past the slogans and the grandstanding, what matters is what was done, what was avoided, and what was ignored. Accountability demands transparency. It means opening the books, admitting when things go wrong, and facing criticism with humility instead of defensiveness. It requires a leader to be present not only during election season but in the aftermath of every decision made on behalf of the people. One of the clearest indicators of leadership is how someone responds to failure. Every politician makes mistakes, some small, some consequential. What separates a leader from a manipulator is their willingness to own those mistakes, to apologize when needed, and to take corrective action. A soundbite can deflect blame or shift focus, but accountability accepts responsibility. Leaders who dodge this obligation betray the public trust. They prioritize personal reputation over public service. In contrast, those who confront their missteps and invite scrutiny exhibit not weakness, but strength. They set a tone for honest governance, and they teach the next generation that integrity matters more than image. Accountability also means answering to the people regularly and sincerely. Town halls, press conferences, community meetings, these are not just formalities. They are platforms for citizens to hold their representatives to account. A leader who avoids these settings, or who uses them merely to deliver pre-packaged messages, undermines the democratic process. Real accountability is uncomfortable. It includes facing tough questions, listening to criticism, and sometimes admitting that an opponent made a valid point. But in doing so, a leader earns credibility. That credibility cannot be manufactured through clever phrases, it is built over time through consistent and honest engagement. True leadership is also tested through how one upholds institutional accountability. This includes how a leader oversees those in positions of power under their influence, advisors, cabinet members, law enforcement, or appointed officials. When misconduct surfaces, does the leader take swift and fair action, or do they offer excuses and protection for their allies? Do they push for reforms that prevent abuse of power, or do they only act when it becomes politically necessary? Accountability is not selective. It must apply equally to friend and foe. A leader who uses their power to shield wrongdoing sends a message that loyalty matters more than justice. Leadership through accountability also demands consistency. A leader cannot change their tune depending on the audience or the political climate. They must maintain the same principles in public and private, in victory and in defeat. When a leader takes one stance before the cameras and another behind closed doors, the foundation of trust begins to crumble. Citizens are increasingly aware of this duplicity, and it breeds disillusionment. Accountability bridges that gap between word and deed. It says to the public, you can believe what I say because I've shown it in my actions. Wesley Hunt's challenge to Jasmine Crockett brings this issue into sharp focus. It wasn't merely about personal confrontation, it was about demanding clarity, responsibility, and substance. In calling out what he perceived as a lack of accountability, he echoed the sentiments of many citizens who feel that too many elected officials are performing rather than serving. The question wasn't just rhetorical, it was symbolic of a deeper frustration, the craving for leadership that is answerable to the people, not protected by party lines or filtered through polished messaging. Soundbites might rally the base or trend online, but they do not solve real problems. They do not fund education, fix healthcare, or balance budgets. Only accountable governance can do that. Another critical element of leadership accountability is fiscal responsibility. How public money is spent reflects a leader's priorities and integrity. Lavish expenditures on personal perks, wasteful contracts, or mismanagement of taxpayer funds must be accounted for. A leader who cannot explain the budget, justify spending, or outline a clear economic vision fails their duty. It's easy to promise prosperity in speeches. It's harder to prove it in balance sheets. And it's accountability that ensures leaders do the latter. Regular audits, public disclosures, and budget transparency are not bureaucratic hurdles, they are tools of democracy. Accountability also ties into legislative consistency. A leader should be able to explain why they voted a certain way, why they supported or opposed a bill, and how those decisions serve the interests of their constituents. When votes seem contradictory or driven by special interest influence, it raises red flags. A soundbite cannot justify a vote that harms the public. Only a clear, reasoned explanation, grounded in values and evidence, can. And that's what citizens deserve, not slogans, but substance. Not theater, but truth. Leadership must never rely on rhetorical skill alone. It must be earned through actions that can withstand scrutiny. In the digital age, it's tempting for leaders to craft their entire image around media moments. Social media rewards outrage, brevity, and performance. But the reality of governance is complex, slow, and often thankless. Accountability cuts through that illusion. It exposes what is real and what is for show. Leaders who welcome this exposure, who invite hard questions, and who embrace oversight prove that they are in the role for the right reasons. Those who shy away from it reveal the limits of their commitment. Accountability is not glamorous. It doesn't trend. But it is the beating heart of effective leadership. Without it, power becomes dangerous, detached, and unchecked. Personal attacks distract from the duty to serve the people. When political discourse devolves into character assassinations and insults, the focus shifts away from the real work that elected officials are entrusted to do. Governance is a solemn responsibility, meant to address the needs, challenges, and aspirations of the people. But when debates become personal, the energy that should be invested in crafting policy, building consensus, and solving problems is instead wasted on defending egos, scoring rhetorical points, and deepening divisions. The moment politics becomes more about personality than purpose, the democratic process begins to suffer. Public servants are elected to uphold the Constitution, represent their constituents, and improve lives, not to entertain audiences or engage in petty rivalries. In today's hyper-polarized environment, personal attacks have become normalized. They are used as weapons to delegitimize opponents, silence dissent, or distract from uncomfortable truths. A sharp insult can dominate news cycles, fuel partisan outrage, and rally supporters. But beneath the surface, it erodes the integrity of public office. It reduces complex issues to simplistic narratives, often framing them as battles between good and evil rather than as policy questions that require thought, empathy, and compromise. This reductionist mindset damages the very fabric of democracy, where disagreement should lead to debate, not destruction. When leaders resort to personal attacks, they signal an inability or unwillingness to argue ideas on merit. Instead of confronting opposing viewpoints with evidence and conviction, they resort to defamation and mockery. The danger of this behavior is especially clear when considering the impact on public trust. Citizens want their leaders to be mature, respectful, and focused on results. When they witness elected officials engaging in name-calling or personal vendettas, they begin to lose faith in the entire system. They ask, if our leaders can't even treat each other with dignity, how can they possibly represent us? This disillusionment discourages civic participation, reduces voter turnout, and fosters apathy. It also contributes to a dangerous cycle where politicians feel rewarded for being provocative rather than productive. The loudest voice in the room becomes more influential than the most thoughtful, and substance takes a back seat to spectacle. Furthermore, personal attacks often disguise the attacker's own shortcomings. Instead of taking accountability, leaders may choose to shift the spotlight to someone else's flaws, real or exaggerated. This tactic is used to deflect criticism and avoid answering difficult questions. It's a calculated move to stir emotion and cloud judgment. But it ultimately reveals a deeper insecurity, a lack of confidence in one's ideas or record. Strong leaders do not need to tear others down to elevate themselves. Their work speaks for them. Their policies reflect their values. Their commitment is evident in the changes they fight for. Personal attacks, on the other hand, are a sign of weakness masked as strength. When Wesley Hunt challenged Jasmine Crockett, the exchange captured national attention not only for what was said, but for how it was said. While some saw it as a bold call-out, others recognized the thin line between holding someone accountable and launching a personal affront. The distinction matters. Accountability questions a person's actions and their alignment with duty. Personal attacks question their worth, intelligence, or integrity without evidence. The former is essential to democracy, the latter corrodes it. The danger lies in blurring the line, where legitimate criticism is dismissed as an attack and attacks are disguised as criticism. Political culture must be careful not to normalize disrespect under the guise of strong debate. Moreover, the overuse of personal attacks distracts both lawmakers and the public from urgent issues. While the media focuses on viral insults, bills go unexamined, hearings go unnoticed, and important discussions are drowned out. Time that could be spent debating education policy, healthcare reform, infrastructure development, or climate strategy is instead spent rebutting or amplifying personal grievances. Legislatures become battlegrounds of ego rather than chambers of policy. The victims of this dysfunction are not the politicians themselves, they are the citizens waiting for solutions. A veteran waiting for care, a parent struggling with school fees, a small business owner facing economic uncertainty, all these people suffer when their representatives are consumed by infighting. There is also a broader cultural impact to consider. When young people observe that politics is a place where insults thrive and cooperation dies, they begin to question whether public service is even a noble path. They lose interest in civics and public affairs. They become cynical, believing that leadership is more about who can shout louder than who can listen better. This undermines the future of representative democracy. A society's political tone sets the tone for its citizens. If leaders model decency, respect, and purpose, those values spread. If they model division, cruelty, and egotism, those values take root as well. Personal attacks also make coalition building more difficult. In politics, progress often depends on finding common ground, even with those you disagree with. But when relationships are damaged by insults, mistrust sets in. Bridges are burned before dialogue can begin. Compromise becomes a sign of weakness rather than a strength. Gridlock becomes inevitable. The ability to pass meaningful legislation is severely reduced because working together requires a foundation of mutual respect. That respect is destroyed every time a leader chooses an insult over an invitation to dialogue. The long-term consequences are devastating. Nothing gets done, frustration grows, and polarization deepens. Leadership demands emotional discipline. It requires the ability to rise above provocation, to stay focused on the mission, and to speak with clarity rather than contempt. When leaders abandon this discipline, they not only fail themselves but betray those they serve. Public discourse should be elevated by those in power, not degraded. Words matter. Tone matters. Intent matters. The best leaders understand that their example influences not just policy, but culture. Every time they choose to engage in a personal attack, they lower the bar for everyone who watches. Every time they choose grace instead of grievance, they raise the bar for what leadership can look like. The public deserves representatives who respect the dignity of the office they hold. That respect is shown not only through decisions and actions but through language and demeanor. Political opponents are not enemies. Disagreement does not require dehumanization. Democracy thrives on differences, but it collapses when those differences are weaponized to divide rather than to understand. Leaders have the power to disagree without being disagreeable, to challenge without humiliating, and to question without condemning. It is a higher road, a harder path, but it is the only path that leads to lasting progress.